Hey guys, welcome back to Home Theater Gurus. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Dolby Atmos. And as a lot of you know, I design home theaters professionally, so I'm going to be looking at this from a little bit different point of view than the normal YouTuber that, is just going to give you their opinion. We're actually going to be looking at mistakes we see all the time. We're going to be hitting on 4 different topics. And this is going to be one of, if not the best Atmos video you've ever seen, because we're not going to be talking again about anyone's preference. We're actually going to be looking at the goals and how, what's wrong with some of the things that are being said out there and how to do it right so your performance greatly, and I don't want to exaggerate the word greatly, but in some instances it is huge because the compromises are just overwhelming that people are being, directed to do. So now we're going to be going back and forth from here to the whiteboard a little bit because we do need to go and show the angles. I'm going to kind of draw everything out to scale. We're going to look at some angles and what's happening as things move around the room and some of the compromises, some of these things that are being said out there are hurting the performance, and it's going to be in a very simplistic way where you can understand it. I'm going to break it down. It's not going to be very complicated, and when the video's done, you're going to be able to look at a room and immediately know if it's got problems and little tweaks you could do in your room that are going to greatly improve the object placement, the spatial cues anywhere in that room. So the number one thing is your Atmos speaker should be down firing. You hear this sometimes, and people will tell other people they should be down firing speakers, not aimed at the main listening position. Now everybody's seen the Dolby Atmos little graph, this one right here just tells you general idea of where your speaker should go. That is just put out there, something simple so guys can, half-ass get it right. That's not going to give you good sound following this diagram. There is so much more information in the Dolby Atmos installation PDF that they put out, back when Dolby Atmos first came out. And we're going to hit on that in this video. So, page 7 of the installation PDF, overhead speaker characteristics. Dolby Atmos is mixed using discrete full-range audio objects that may move around anywhere in 3-dimensional space. Okay, so that right there, full-range audio, that means we don't want speakers that are just 200 hertz and up, like we've also heard that. We want some full-range, some good quality speakers up there. Now, of course, our subs are going to handle from 80, 90 hertz and below, so they don't have to reach that low, but they need to be decent speakers. With this in mind, overhead speakers should complement the frequency response output and power handling capabilities of the listener level speakers. The listener level speakers are your bed layer, your LCR, your left, right, and center, your surrounds, and your rears. So they need to complement those speakers. Overhead speakers with a wide dispersion pattern are desirable for use in a Dolby Atmos system. So speakers with waveguides, things like that, are going to be your more narrow dispersion. Domes are going to be, by nature, a wider dispersion. So you just need to pay attention to what you have. All right, so for us to have a frequency response, we're going to key in on that. Frequency response, output, power handling. For us to have a frequency response that's similar to the bed layer, we have to be aimed at the main listening position. We don't want any speaker in the room to just take a back seat just for the hell of it. Okay, not when we could do it right. It doesn't cost us any more money to get a decent speaker that can actually be aimed. Now, we may not be able to aim it right at the listening position. We have another video out, episode, I'll just post it right here, what episode it is. But on that one, we actually looked at the degrees and calculated the degrees. If you go 45 forward with your top front, which is pretty standard, let's say that speaker is in line with this chair over here. So it's 45 degrees from this chair, but then when you come over here towards the main listening position, we were over 50. Across over here, a 4-seat row, we were like over 60 degrees to this seat. So if you had a down-firing speaker, which we did in that room, you're so far off axis, you've lost all your high energy, and we actually took the mic, played the pink noise that you hear when your receiver, you're setting your levels up. And that's kind of a sample of every octave. We held the mic underneath that speaker, and it goes, and as we moved out about 20 degrees, it goes to, you start to lose all that high energy. And by the time you got over here to 60 degrees, it was nothing but lows. There was no high energy really to it at all. It was a very dull sounding speaker. And what that's going to do when objects are being placed around the room, those spatial cues are going to be extremely weak. They're not going to be localized like they should. And it's going to perform very poorly. You're not going to be happy. And if you hear someone's room where they're actually aimed, it's going to sound much better than your room. Now, being a home theater designer, I like using speakers that don't, or brands that don't have any compromises. That's why I use Triad. There's the 9-sat rotatable, which can actually hit over 70 degrees off axis, and it can be aimed directly at that point. It's laser aimed. You know, that's really the only speaker I know of anywhere around its price range, or even double, that's capable of that. And also matches the bed layer speakers I use. But the RSL 34E is also a good one for people on a budget. It has an angled baffle. I think it's a 15 or 20 degree baffle, but then the tweeter's angled as well. Now when I use that speaker, because it is limited in how far or how much angle it has, I won't go all the way to 45 degrees. I may pull it back a little bit just to get a little bit better sound to the main listening position, because we are limited a little. It is a good wide dispersion speaker, but still, you know, I don't like to push it too much. So if you want really great sound, do not use down 5-inch speakers. Aim them at the main listening position. Now number 2 is a biggie. We see this all the time, and this is directly from the one-page diagram that Dolby has out, and I really wish they would fix it or put a note on there or something. But number 2 is the Atmos speakers should be in line with the mains. This is so wrong. It totally ignores any type of degrees whatsoever. You may as well just throw your speakers just on the ceiling anywhere, because that's basically what they're having you do here. And if you go back and look at the PDF, they actually explain how you should do it, and there's actually a spacing tolerance that you're supposed to adhere to. They're not supposed to be in line with the mains. All right, so let's go over here to the board real quick, and I'm going to show you the right way to do it using the PDF, and you're going to understand how plain goofy it is to use the mains as, you know, a reference point. Before we do that, just realize there is no room, okay? Everything is angles, everything is degrees. We've got a bubble of sound that we're trying to create anywhere in our room. You know, there's no wall here. You know, we're not gonna place, oh, this speaker has to be on a wall, this speaker has to be on a ceiling. No, this speaker has to be in this angle of degrees, this degree window. That's where the speaker has to be. If that ends up on a wall or a ceiling, so be it. We don't know that yet. We're gonna calculate our angles and degrees. So just come at this from that perspective, that we're trying to create this atmosphere in our room where we can place objects and spatial cues anywhere in the room, but they need to be placed properly. We don't want big holes anywhere, gaps where we can't place an object because speakers are too far apart, maybe they're too close together, we have no separation. You know, that's what we're going to be looking at here, so just keep that in mind, okay? The goal is this bubble of sound that we are trying to create in our space. All right guys, so first what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at what Dolby Atmos actually says we should have for the spacing of our Atmos speakers. So the first thing we need to do is determine where we're gonna be sitting. So this is a 16-foot room. Now, I've got some dashed lines right here. The top of this room, we're gonna say this is a 12-foot room. If you go all the way up to the top, this right here is an 8-foot and this is a 9-foot. Those dashed lines are different ceiling heights. We're gonna look how that affects the spacing. So we're gonna say 16 feet. Let's just place them at 7 feet. Let's say the seated head's at 3 feet, which is, you know, generally gonna be very close to reality. So the center of your head is right here. So everything is based off of this point right here. All right, so to find 45 forward, which that is where the top front should usually be in a Dolby Atmos system, that's where they recommend. So if this is an 8-foot ceiling, we can go 8 minus 3, because we're 3 feet from the floor, that's 5. So we can go straight up, and then we can go 5 foot forward. That's gonna give us our 45 degrees. So let's do that real quick, 5 feet. That's right here. Okay, so we know that this is a 45-degree line from this green where your head is to that Atmos speaker. It's 45 degrees. Doesn't matter where the room is. We can keep on going. That's 45 degrees. So you see there's an issue right here. When at 8 feet, you know, it's here. At 9 feet, it's going to be here. At 12 feet, it's on the front wall. So we're not even on the ceiling to have this Atmos speaker properly placed. If we had a 12-foot ceiling, we are on the front wall. If we were to put it on the ceiling, now we're less than 45 degrees forward, which is okay. There is a tolerance, but that's gonna be something we're gonna hit on in a minute. All right, so let's just write, you know, we're 5 feet here, so we're gonna write this on there. We're 5 feet from the ceiling, just so we don't forget. And we went 5 feet forward, okay? Now, just to make this easier for us to, visualize or to make sense of this 45-degree line, if we were 9 feet, a 9-foot ceiling, that would be 6 feet, and we would have gone 6 feet to put our speaker right here. If we were 12 feet, 12-foot ceilings, that is what, 9 feet from our head. So then we would have gone 9 feet this way. And that is what's forcing us to have to put that Atmos speaker on the front wall, not the ceiling. If we put the speaker on the ceiling, it may not even be in tolerance at all. It could be completely misplaced. If we wanted it right at 45, it's got to go on the wall. So I guess we're busting another myth here, because that's another one that I wasn't going to talk about, but there you go. All right, so now we've got all these different heights. We need to find out how wide they need to be. Now, if we go to the PDF, the installation PDF, and we look at the width, how wide they should be, from the 0 line, the tolerance is 30 to 60. That's where they should be. I personally like 35, but let's look at how the different heights of the room are going to affect that. It's just going to be just like this. All right, so now we're looking overhead. So here's our seat. All right, and actually we're not going to use that because I don't want to draw on it. Here's your head for the main listening position in this room. Okay, our main speakers, we're going to say they're here. All right, what we have to do is we have to determine where our 30, or wherever we're going to put them. Like I said, I like 35. I think it sounds good. It gives us good separation from the bed layer. So if we want to find that 35-degree line, you see how that line, it's an angle. So as you get closer to the main listening position, you're going to have less width right here. As you get further away, you're going to have more width right here. So it has nothing to do with where your main speaker's at. The higher your ceiling is, the further they're going to be apart. So as you see, ceiling height is what dictates how wide your speakers should be apart. It has absolutely nothing to do with your main speakers whatsoever. And for them to even put that on that PDF, or not the PDF, but to put that on the one-page diagram, I have no idea why they put that on there. It needs to be taken off. There should be a big note that says, do not use this to place the width of your mains or your Atmos, because it has absolutely nothing to do with it. It is all ceiling height, completely ceiling height. Everything is angle based. As your ceiling gets higher, they're going to spread out more. They're going to get pushed forward more. Things are going to change. If it's a short ceiling, they're going to be a lot closer to you. They're not going to be spread out as much. But if you're 15 feet from the front wall, your mains are going to be spread way out. But if it's a low ceiling, the Atmos are going to be much tighter together. So things change as the room changes, because we're going off of angles here. Everything is angle based. So if you don't have a program that can do it for you, get out a piece of paper and with a compass, a protractor, or something that you can find angles, and just plot out your room from an overhead view. Go forward and then find out where you need to have those speakers, 35 degrees or whatever you want to use. I like 35 degrees. You could use 45. 45 would be easier. If it was 45, then we know that if we went 5 foot forward, we would just go 5 foot out. You can do that too. Now, the number 3 thing we see is on-wall speakers. A lot of people push that. A lot of manufacturers of speakers push that because they're trying to sell a product. Now, you need to understand that. They're trying to sell a product. It doesn't mean it's what's good for your room. You call them up and they're gonna be like, oh yeah, they'll work great. Will they get sound to your seats? Yes. Will it be great sound? Is it properly placed? Often no, but sometimes yes. So we're gonna look at a room here. Now this is looking at it from like the back to front. All right, so we have a room here. Let's say this room is 8 feet tall and 14 feet wide. So 8 foot tall and 14 feet wide. We've got our guy sitting right here. Here's his head 3 feet off the floor. Okay, now we have our surround speakers. Now before we place these surrounds, I want you to understand, a lot of people think they need to be at ear level, and that's not really where they're gonna sound the best. I know, like if you look in the Dolby PDF, they do recommend or do allow you to go above head level, 1.25 times the height of the LCR, and that's generally about where I go. Get them above the heads, because if you put them at head level, the person sitting next to you is going to completely block that speaker. It's not going to sound good. You can also push them forward a little bit. There's some tweaks you can do, but I like to follow the practices from the Trinoff white pages. They have a lot of good information about what sounds good with a Dolby Atmos, DTX, the immersive sound formats. Don't take everything as a cold hard, this is the way it has to be. We're trying to do what sounds best. And that is our goal, to create this 3D atmosphere and make it sound awesome. So we're gonna have these raised up a little bit. Let's say we put them up here at 4 feet, just slightly above head level. And let's see, we'll rewrite our 8 feet so y'all can remember this is an 8-foot ceiling. All right, so you call up a company and they tell you, sure, you can put these speakers on your wall, no problem, they sound great on the wall. That's what we designed them to do. All right, so you put them right here. Okay, so now first we need to look at where they should be. Remember, we wanted 35 degrees of separation. All right, so I'm gonna use my speed square here and we're gonna mark about where that 35-degree mark would be, where that line would go. Okay, so we're there. Let's flip it around. Okay, let's go ahead and draw a line across it. Okay, so that is the path where our speakers should be depending on the height. Remember, if the ceiling got taller, they would be spread out more. Now, as we see, this is an 8-foot ceiling. See, this line's going out this way. I mean, if we had a 12, 13, 14-foot ceiling, we would get to a point to where we would be okay with speakers on the wall. But as we can see right here, we're not even close to being okay. The speakers are nowhere near where they should be. They need to be on the ceiling. Okay, just to make this a little quicker, I went ahead and I calculated, I used my speed square to get the angles for these different speakers. Now, this is gonna be pretty much to scale. It's gonna be very close to what you would have in an 8 feet with a 14 foot of width to this room. So, a standard room that many of us would have a system like this in. Okay, so our surrounds are lifted a little bit. They're at 5 degrees. Now remember, from this side to this side, directly from one side to the other, we have 180 degrees. But now we've lifted them a little bit. So now, from this speaker, this surround to that surround, now we have 170 degrees to go from one to the other. So we need to fill the gaps in to where we don't have any holes. We want to have even panning for anything that comes across this ceiling. Remember, we're trying to create that bubble of sound, that atmosphere in our room. So we have 30 degrees to this speaker that's on our wall. Now you could say you could have gone up a little higher, 35 degrees, whatever. The bottom line is it's too close. I mean, we've got 25 to 30 degrees of separation between these two speakers. That is way too little. So what's going to happen is objects are going to pan really fast to that speaker right there, where they should travel more and take up more space. It should be over here, right here. It should not be right there. So instead of an object panning from here to here, you get a very small window, a very small sound stage between your bed layer and your Atmos speakers. So very little movement. And the even bigger problem is, remember, okay, here's 90, this is 30, well, that's 60. So we have a 60-degree gap from our Atmos speakers to directly overhead. So all the way across, we've got a blistering 120 degrees of gap. So there's 120 degrees. We're trying to put objects on the ceiling above our head, and here we have created a 120-degree gap. Nothing's gonna feel it. Now, yeah, you're gonna get some lift and you're gonna think it sounds great. I'm telling you right now, what you have is not anything like what Dolby Atmos is supposed to sound like. It's not your fault. Part of the problem is whoever was pushing it, when you pick up the phone and you said, hey, this is my room, is this the right speaker for me? And they're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. They're trying to make a sale. They don't care. They're not gonna actually take your room and say, no, this would be a better choice, because that better choice is probably from another company. Now, the on-wall speakers are actually pretty good. I mean, the speakers themselves are not always bad. It's just they're not placed in the right position. So that speaker, if you could get a bracket, if you already have some on-wall speakers, just understand by moving that speaker right here is going to tremendously sound better, because now we've got, 55 degrees here, we've got 5 here, so now we have 50 degrees of gap, so we've got some nice separation, and then we've got 70 degrees to here. So that's enough to where we can fill that gap in and get a good sound overhead. We can close 70 degrees. We can't do anything with 120 degrees. We kind of have a mess here, but hopefully you're understanding that. There's nothing up here. We've got to get speakers up there. We need speakers to be able to pan from one to another seamlessly as objects move across our room and our bubble that we're trying to create. So, are on-wall speakers the right choice? If you've got a high ceiling, or maybe you've got a very narrow room, compared to the height, maybe so. But you need to actually do some numbers, sketch this stuff out, protractors are cheap, you know, and you can find the angles, or you can find some programs online. It's not hard to do, but you just need to take a few minutes and do something like this to find out where they should be and find out what's right for your room. Okay, now keep this in mind as well. We're gonna draw our little guy right here, sitting in his chair. That's his head, okay? Now, if you measure to the ceiling 5 feet and you go 5 foot forward and you put a speaker on the wall right there, we already know it's very possibly too far apart to fill the gap on the ceiling. We're also shooting all the good sound straight down, because this seating area, the main listening position, if you're 45 degrees forward, your main listening position is probably going to be 50 degrees off axis, and the speaker or the seat across the room over 60 degrees off axis. All your good sound is going here. You're not getting that shh with the high energy when you play the pink noise at your seat. You're getting the so you're striking out all over the place. You can't feel the gap across the ceiling very well at all, and you're way off axis. So if you were to take that speaker, move it to the ceiling, if it should be on the ceiling, if you do the math and just say that's where it needs to be, and you angle it towards the seats, the sound in your room is going to be substantially, and I can't really stress enough how big a jump it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be something from where, Atmos isn't that big a deal, I'm not really that impressed, to just wow. I mean, where it's just amazing. Even DSU, the up mixers, I mean, everything's going to improve to a point that you had never expected, because now your spatial cues are so much stronger and you're actually feeling gaps that before you just weren't feeling at all, and you just didn't realize it. You were blaming it on Atmos the whole while it was a speaker setup issue. Okay, and the last one is number 4, and we can actually use this little diagram here for number 4, and that is top middle does nothing. You don't need it. Top middle is for large rooms. Okay, so this is our room. Straight ahead, we went 45 degrees forward to place this speaker. Okay, we're 45 degrees right here. Let's write that up here, 45 degrees. Okay, now usually the top rear, people will place it 45 degrees back. Now remember, we do have a window. If you have a riser back here, especially, you're gonna be raised up another foot or so, so this seat actually needs to be a little higher, because it's gonna be a foot higher than that seat back. Most of your seat backs for home theater seating are 44 inches. So we have to get this rear raised up a little bit to clear that seat so that the good sound is not being blocked by that seat. So we have lifted or tilted our bed layer. It's no longer going to be sitting close to that, just 1 foot above the 0 line. It's got a little tilt to it now. So we have to compensate for that tilt. This speaker no longer needs to be here, because let's say that tilt raised this one 10 degrees. It was already a foot above. So now let's say we're 20 degrees above the 0 line, and that's probably pretty close. When I do my room plans, I actually look at all this information when I'm laying them out. I can see every angle, and I can place everything perfectly, make sure my separation is perfect. All right, so let's say we're 20 degrees, so we're at 160 here. If we place this speaker at 45, so that's 135, because if you add 90 plus 45, that's 135. We're 25 degrees of separation between this speaker and that speaker. Doesn't matter how it looks in the room or how close you are to that back wall, it's always about the angles. That's the separation we're looking for. Not inches from one speaker to the other, but how much separation in angles. 25 degrees is not enough. So we need to shift this speaker forward a little bit. So instead of putting it at 45 degrees back, you may want to put it at 35 degrees. Shove it forward a little bit, get a little more separation back here. We can afford to do that. Okay, so now this speaker is at 35 back. But now, if you've only got one row, there's nothing wrong with keeping that at 45 degrees. So we'll draw another speaker here at 45 degrees. The distance between these two in angles, remember, all we care about is angles. We could care less what the actual inches are from one speaker versus another. That's not separation. It's angles and separation. We've got 90 degrees right here. And even if we brought this one right here at 35, that one is 80 degrees of separation. If you took your mains and you spread them apart, to 90 degrees, normally we want them around 60, 53 to 60 is that sweet spot where the sound stage opens up. If you get them too wide, you start getting past 75, you're gonna have holes, because the speakers are too wide to create a phantom image, and we must create a phantom image to have realistic sound over our head. If we're 90 degrees of separation, there's no way any speaker on planet Earth is gonna be able to give you what you should be getting overhead. All right, so this is where the top middle comes in. So let's go ahead and put some speakers up here because it's getting a little cluttered. All right, so now look at what we've got. We've got our LCR right here. Now they may be raised up a tad, you know, especially if we have like multiple rows, but let's say they're at 0. So we've got 45 degrees between our bed layer in the front of our room to our top front. And with the top middle right here, we've got another 45 degrees to this speaker. And this one, we got 35 to 45 degrees to this speaker. Now, of course, on the back, our separation between our top rear and our rear speaker, that depends on what we had to do with the bed layer back here, whether we had to raise it up or not. So we've maintained separation, enough separation to get great sound and great movement between all of our speakers. And we also have made sure we don't have any holes. You take this speaker out, boom, you're back to a hole. When you put this speaker in and you play Dolby Atmos tracks, something you've seen before like the Amaze or something like that on the Dolby Atmos demo disc, when the sound comes overhead like the tree branches, before it was gonna sound, you know, it sounds good. But when you get a top middle above you, it's gonna have you doing this. I mean, you are literally, it's gonna transform your system and you're gonna realize how much you were missing because you cannot feel a gap that big. So we've made sure that we're feeling our gaps coming across the room from front to back. We made sure we've got great panning coming from side to side. That's how we create a realistic atmosphere in our room. And guys, please don't take this as bashing any one system. I mean, there may be times where you just have to compromise, you know, and if that's the case, then so be it. But we just have to be careful when someone's talking about, you know, they added a voice of God speaker or something like that and it transformed their system. And then they've got all these people watching a YouTube video thinking, oh, I need a voice of God speaker. You know, well, you need to look at that person's system. Maybe it was poorly set up. Maybe they had on-wall speakers, you know, and the gap on their ceiling was huge and they couldn't fill it. And they don't even realize it. They don't know their system was set up bad. They just know they stuck a speaker on the ceiling, a voice of God. It sounds so much better because yes, it filled the hole. Atmos and great sound is not always about having the best equipment, the best speakers, the best gear. It's about placement. You get those speakers placed right and that's when the magic happens. Now, yes, a 7.1.6 system, you know, a processor to push that, you know, that does get expensive. And when we did episode 3, we didn't really, you know, there was nothing out there reasonably priced. Now we have processors that can do a full 9.1.6. And here we've got the Anthem AVM 70. We've got the Tone Winner coming in for review, the 300 processor. That is it can do a 7.1.6 or a 9.1.4. And it's called a 16 channel, but that's because it can process 3 different subs, which we use a MiniDSP for that anyway. But, you know, so that processor is, well, here's a price of it here. I think it's like $1,500, something like that. I mean, it's, for what it is, it's very, very cheap. And I've even got some friends that have tried it and they were pretty impressed even with the room correction it has. We're supposed to get that in for review, so I'm pretty excited about that because of all the speakers you can add in your room, the top middle is probably my favorite because it's such a big hole up there. You know, the front wide, that's pretty big, but you know, we've got our mains at 30, you know, usually 30 from 0, and our surrounds over here around 90. So that gap is not too big. The wides are still a big improvement, but that top middle is game changing. It really is. So, all right, guys, do me a favor. If you learned anything, hit that like button so YouTube knows that this was a good video and they'll kind of push it a little better. Hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know the new videos are going to be coming out. We're going to be doing the Devastator build right up after this. I've been looking forward to this. It's sitting in my shop in there waiting to be put together. I got 2 of them. I've got 2 Eminence 21-inch drivers that are going in the Devastators. So we're gonna have a video on those. And then we've also got the Speaker Power SP8000 amplifier that's gonna be pushing those. And those are all from GSG. And this is gonna be one of the baddest subwoofer kits you can get, if not the baddest kit you can get. And now GSG does complete cabinets. So if you're not a DIY guy, which I mean, of course the kits are like puzzles, they're really easy to put together. And like I said, I'm gonna have a video on that, and I think I might time it so you can actually see how long it actually took me. You know, have a little start-stop timer. Every time I go in there, I'll hit the start button so you can see what I actually have invested time-wise. We're using a brad nailer, and so we're not waiting for glue to dry. So it's gonna go pretty quick. You can have it in a variety of finishes, from an epoxy finish that gives you like a Duritex Pro looking cabinet with a very, very nice finish. You can have a stain cabinet, veneers. So there's some variety of the finishes you can choose from depending on, if you got it in a living room or if it's hidden, you may not care. You just get the epoxy finish with, the black cabinet finish. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this one. I will see y'all for the next one.